Chapter 1 Introduction of Alan. Alan woke up to the familiar sounds of birds chirping outside his window and the distant hum of morning traffic. His room, filled with posters of far-off places and bustling cities, served as a constant reminder of his dreams to escape the confines of his small town. Every day felt like a repetition of the one before, yet Alan harbored hopes of a life filled with excitement and new experiences. As he got ready for the day, Alan's thoughts wandered to the internet forum he had discovered a few months ago. It was a place where people from all over the world shared their stories and sought connections. Alan found solace in this online community where he could be himself without fear of judgment. The anonymity of the internet allowed him to express his true self, something he couldn't do in his conservative hometown. Chapter 2 Life in a Small Town. Life in Alan's small town was predictable and monotonous. Everyone knew everyone else, and privacy was a luxury few could afford. The townspeople had lived there for generations, and change was a concept they rarely entertained. The town was a close-knit community, but it was also a place where deviations from the norm were met with suspicion and gossip. Alan's parents were well-respected members of the community. His father owned a small auto repair shop, and his mother was a teacher at the local elementary school. They loved Alan dearly, but their traditional views often clashed with his dreams and aspirations. They envisioned a simple, stable life for him, one that involved staying close to home and following a well-trodden path. Chapter 3 Online Communication. On the forum, Alan found an escape from the constraints of his small town. It was here that he met Alex, a user who seemed to understand him in ways no one else did. Alex was articulate, insightful, and shared Alan's passion for adventure and self-discovery. Their conversations quickly evolved from casual exchanges to deep, meaningful discussions about life, dreams, and fears. Alan felt a connection with Alex that he had never experienced before. They talked about everything from their favorite movies and books to their hopes for the future. Alex's life in a big city fascinated Alan, and he often found himself daydreaming about the day they would finally meet. Alex became a beacon of hope, a symbol of the life Alan longed for. Chapter 4 Deep Communication. As their conversations grew more personal, Alan began to open up about his struggles and insecurities. He shared his feelings about living in a small town, his fears about the future, and his dreams of breaking free from the constraints of his current life. Alex listened with empathy and offered advice that made Alan feel understood and supported. They discussed their plans for the future and talked about the possibility of meeting in person. Alan's excitement grew with each passing day, and he began to see Alex as more than just a friend. He envisioned a future where they could explore the world together, free from the judgments and limitations of their current lives. Chapter 5 Plans to Meet. After months of talking, Alan and Alex decided it was time to meet in person. Alex offered to visit Alan's town, expressing a genuine interest in seeing the places Alan had described in their conversations. Alan was thrilled at the prospect of finally meeting Alex face-to-face and began making detailed plans for their visit. He shared the news with his best friend Jake, who had always been his confidant and supporter. Jake was excited for Alan but also cautious, reminding him to be careful and keep his expectations in check. Despite Jake's warnings, Alan couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and hope for the future. Chapter 6 Preparing for the Meeting. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Alan meticulously planned every detail, from the places they would visit to the clothes he would wear. He wanted everything to be perfect and spent hours imagining how their first meeting would go. The night before the meeting, Alan barely slept. He lay awake, replaying their conversations in his mind and picturing the moment they would finally meet. His heart raced with anticipation, and he wondered if Alex was feeling the same way. Chapter 7 First Impression Expanded. On the day of the meeting, Alan arrived at the train station early. He stood nervously, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. As the train pulled in, his heart pounded in his chest. Finally, he saw someone approaching him, but the person didn't look like the Alex he had imagined. Standing before him was a man much older and heavier than he had pictured. The man had a full head of grey hair and wore glasses that looked out of place in the youthful image Alan had built in his mind. His clothes were conservative, a stark contrast to the trendy outfits Alex had described in their conversations. Alan, the man asked, his voice deep and unfamiliar. Alan's initial shock quickly turned to disappointment. All the fantasies and expectations he had built up over the months came crashing down in an instant. Alex looked nothing like the photos he had sent. Alex, Alan replied, trying to mask the confusion and disappointment in his voice. Yes, it's me, Alex said with a forced smile. I'm sorry if I look different from my pictures. I should have been honest with you from the start. Alan tried to hide his emotions and find common topics for conversation, but everything felt awkward and strained. Alex tried to be friendly and open, but the disconnect between the person Alan had imagined and the reality standing before him was too much to ignore. Chapter 8: Disappointment expanded. As they walked through the town, Alan's disappointment grew. He had envisioned a day filled with laughter and connection, but the reality was far from it. Every conversation felt forced, and the sense of betrayal lingered in the back of his mind. They visited the places Alan had planned, but the excitement he had felt earlier was gone. He tried to engage with Alex, but the illusion he had created over the months was shattered. Alan realized that the person he thought he knew was just a figment of his imagination. At one point, they sat down in a small cafe, the atmosphere tense and awkward. Alan stirred his coffee absently, his mind racing with thoughts and emotions. I owe you an explanation, Alex said, finally, breaking the silence. I wasn't completely honest with you about who I am. My real name is Amir and I'm 53 years old. I've been divorced for 10 years and have 5 children. Alan looked up, stunned. Why did you lie to me? I was afraid, Amir admitted. I thought you wouldn't want to talk to me if you knew the truth. I enjoyed our conversation so much that I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. Alan shook his head, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. I thought we had something real, he said quietly, but now I don't even know who you are. Chapter 9: The Dark Truth. As the day continued, Amir tried to win back Alan's trust by sharing more about his life. He spoke of his childhood in Iran, his move to the United States, and his experiences as an immigrant. Alan listened, feeling a strange mix of empathy and wariness. Then, Amir mentioned something that made Alan's blood run cold. I want to show you a different way of life, Alan. There's a tradition in my culture called Bakabasa Bazi. It's a path that can offer you new opportunities, a way to explore your true self. Alan's eyes widened. He had heard of Bachabazi, a practice involving the exploitation of young boys, often forced into servitude or worse. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Amir's intentions were not just deceitful but dangerous. What are you talking about? Alan asked, his voice shaking. It's not as bad as it sounds, Amir insisted. You'll be taken care of, given opportunities you never had before. You just need to trust me. Alan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I can't believe this. I trusted you, and now you're trying to lure me into something horrible. I need to go. Chapter 10: Alan's Escape. Alan left the cafe in a hurry, his mind racing. He couldn't believe how close he had come to falling into a dangerous situation. He realized he needed to protect himself and warn others about Amir. As he walked home, Alan's phone buzzed with messages from Amir, pleading for him to reconsider. Alan blocked his number, determined to cut all ties with the man who had betrayed his trust. Returning home, Alan felt a mix of relief and fear. He knew he had narrowly escaped a dangerous situation and needed to take steps to protect himself. He decided to report Amir to the authorities and warn others on the forum about his deceitful and dangerous intentions. Chapter 11: Rebuilding Trust. Several months passed, and Alan focused on rebuilding his life. He became more cautious in his online interactions and made sure to verify the identities of people he communicated with. He also sought support from his family and friends, who helped him heal from the traumatic experience. Alan continued to devote time to his studies and hobbies, finding solace in his routine. He also began volunteering at a local organization that supported victims of exploitation, using his experience to help others avoid similar dangers. Chapter 12: A New Beginning. Alan's journey of self-discovery and healing was far from over, but he felt stronger and more confident than ever. He had learned valuable lessons about trust and the importance of taking care of himself. He also found new passions and interests that gave his life meaning and purpose. Alan realized that his journey was just beginning and that there were many interesting things ahead of him. He was ready for new challenges and trials, knowing that now he was stronger and more confident in himself.